Hey, you're listening to Blindsight. Let's go. Mental health isn't something to take lightly. It's time to fight. It's time to thrive. Let's do this.
Welcome to Blindsight. I'm your host, Bill Lundgren. And again, I'm being joined by my brilliant producer, Jonathan Price. We have a lot of fun when we have a chance to talk about topics. And today's topic is an important one, I think, about invisibility. That sometimes we as blind people don't see us just as we don't see them, or they try to figure out some way to get us off their hands. And it's especially bad when we go to a new environment like a party. What do we do? How do we increase our visibility and stop people? What people do with me invariably is to get a chair and have me sit in the chair, even though everybody else is standing, which is a little disconnected here, even with the dog. But I know that some of my hosts have been a little leery of the dog because one time, not Aiden, but an earlier dog, was so enthusiastic when somebody came through the front door to join the party that he turned around and his tail completely cleaned off a coffee table with drinks and dips and so forth. Yeah. And I tell you that as a reminder to pay, if you have a dog, to pay attention to that, which I do now. I try not to have a set of weights that I put on his tail to keep it down. But anyway, but the thing is, people, unfortunately, the only way I can describe it is people don't know what to do with us. Yeah. Because we're of a different milieu, shall we say, because we can't see anything. And so, or at least they perceive us as being unable to see anything, and they don't know what to do with us. And that's where your job is to combat invisibility. That's, what I want to talk about today. Do you have any thoughts, Jonathan?
I have thoughts all day long. Some of them are relevant to our conversation, and some of them are so very not. But I'm doing good. Yeah, I'm going to come at this from a sighted perspective, and I think it's important to give both the sides of it because, as somebody who is sighted, I'm a sightling. Evan likes to call me a sightling. That's great. It's a new term we've kind of coined, but it's. When I started working here, I think I mentioned last week the story about Evan and I, kind of our first real full-on interaction outside of the office. And it has opened my eyes to seeing somebody who is blind or who has a visual acuity issue, or, and that could be either physical or even emotional or mental or anything like that. It's allowed me to, I guess, see them in a different light, a different way, and approach them in a way that is more helpful and not that I was condescending before, but even as a sighted person, the things that we say out of naivety can be misconstrued as condescending. And so you could have the biggest heart in the world and still say something that's incredibly condescending or offensive and just not know it. And it's just an ability to have the open communication of like, hey, look, let's not say that, but yes, I could use your help, know?
Well, one of the things that people say, I'll see you tomorrow. And say, I'm sorry I said that.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I even ran into a guy, or was talking to a guy a couple days ago, and he said that I was telling him about we're going to start doing live shows and for YouTube and Facebook and things like that. And he's like, well, blind people don't watch videos and movies and stuff like that. I was like, oh, dude, you have no idea. Yeah. You have no clue. And his eyes were kind of, in shock. And when I kind of explained to him the audio transcriptions and descriptions and all that kind of stuff, I was like, it's pretty incredible. It's like listening to Reader's Theater or listening to an old time radio show.
Right.
I mean, go back and listen to those 1940s radio hour and that kind of stuff. And oh my goodness, those are some of the most imaginative, and you don't have to have sight to know what's going on. Sound effects and Foley and the tone of voice and all that kind of stuff. I mean, I've got my cup in front of me, and I can make coffee sounds and drinking, and I've got all this kind of stuff. I'm drinking my, drink and all this. It's fun. And I think it's a good way to make people kind of come in relationship with the world around them. And so that's kind of our launching off point.
Yeah, I have a guest coming in September, and she's sighted, but she's into theater, and she's coming because a former roommate of hers is appearing at in a juicy role in the DCPA. And nice. One of the things she asked me to make sure that we get tickets for the audio description so that she could have some exposure to live audio description. Nice. She gets it in New York, especially when I come to town. Yeah. But she's really interested in how that's done because a lot of people just don't know what that's all about.
Right.
But in talking, about what we're talking about, invisibility, one of the things that I think is a chronic issue for people with any kind of physical disability is that a version of shame where we feel second class, and we feel somewhat uncomfortable because we don't fit in, and we hesitate to be assertive. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm not talking about being aggressive. Sometimes we have to be that too. But for example, what I am aware of trying to do now is when I come into a party and someone does the I'll get you a chair, is for me to just speak up and say, I don't need a chair. What would really help me if you could introduce me to someone here that you think I might connect with.
Yeah.
And, the host is not going to say, well, there's nobody here that you can connect with. So you don't have to worry about that response.
Right.
But it puts it on the host to do what the host is supposed to do, and that is to set up a connection, however good or bad it is, with someone at the party and not feel like they have to take full responsibility for you.
Yeah. Yep.
But you see, the key is really to tell people what we need instead of the chair. We try to be nice and accept the chair, but that's not going to do it for us.
No, you're only hurting yourself more.
Yeah. And the invisibility is because we don't speak up, or we may not speak up when we need to and say, this is what I need. Every time I go to a doctor's office, and I've said this to the audience before, that I have to train the nurse or the receptionist or whoever, the practitioner, to give me their elbow so that I can, I'll know where to go, much more than having them grab me and take me to where I need to go.
Right.
But that means I have to be assertive. Now, what difference do you see, Jonathan, between assertive and aggressive?
Oh, there's a big difference. Assertion is really standing strong in who you are, and being aggressive is trying to change somebody else because of your differing opinion. That's kind of how I see it, as a loose, kind of term. If I see somebody as being assertive, if I'm going to be assertive, I'm going to take a stand for what I believe. And if somebody is coming to me and approaching me, I can stand my ground. I can say, no, this is how I'm seeing things. This is how this is happening. And that's more of an assertion. Whereas the aggressor is, I'm going to be on the attack. I'm going to go see something that is wrong, or go see something that is.
I'm going to be in charge.
Right.
It's me. I don't care what you think.
That's right. You're taking that person's power away from them,
Right.
rather than
Right.
holding power for yourself. I think that's
Right.
a little. It's kind of nuanced in a way, but I want to go back real quick to your chair thing. Sometimes having that, if somebody offers you a chair and you take it, it's holding kind of this light bulb on yourself, the spotlight on yourself, because then you have the blind guy in the corner and everybody's kind of paying attention to them without engaging. And so it's like this counteracting good deed, if you will, that you've not only, perpetrated, or taken part in, that now you have to combat that as well.
Well, that's the people in wheelchairs can't do anything about it. But, we train people to just kneel down and be eye to eye with the person in the wheelchair, rather than looking down on them, which is it's a one down position, and it's not a good way to work.
Mm-hmm. Well, I've been in situations where I'll talk to somebody in a wheelchair, and I've either sat down next to them or whatever, and I got chewed out because they didn't want me to. Like, they wanted me to just stand and be my normal self, because them being in a wheelchair is also their normal selves.
Right.
And for me to come, quote unquote, down to their level. And it's just based on the person. You have to, it's not this one size fits all kind of thing. You have to
exactly
ask and talk.
But you see, that's where assertiveness, where the person said, I'm uncomfortable having you down to my level. Or the person say, look, this is what I want. Mm-hmm. And then we can say, great, thank you for telling me.
Yeah.
And that's the key in terms of, see, one of the things, if nothing else that we do in this program, the important thing is to give people with disabilities power, the power that is rightly theirs, and shouldn't have to be fought for. But sometimes people just don't think. Mm-hmm. And so consequently, we have to educate them to say, this is what I need you to do. And it's just, and once they find out, oh, okay, fine, then they're glad, but they need directions from us sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And it'd be nice if they were taught all of this, and we don't have to do the work, but this is not the way of the world. We have to let people know. And as you say, if somebody prefers to have you stand above them, that's fine. But you need to say that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's what when we talk about invisibility, the invisibility is self-caused sometimes. Sometimes they try to make whoever they are trying to make us invisible, and we need to say, no, I'm not going to be invisible.
Yeah, it's how comfortable are you with self? Yeah. And when you're comfortable with yourself, you can stand up for or you can just not even stand up. I think that's a too bold of an approach necessarily, but you can have confidence in yourself to say, look, I'm not going to be invisible. I'm going to go, command this party, and I'm going to go have fun and talk to my friends.
Right.
And I'm going to go make a friend, and who knows, what is going to happen at that party, and or that event or that gathering or that gala or whatever. But just to have the confidence in oneself to say, I'm not going to be invisible today, because a lot of times the invisibility is sometimes it's only in our minds. And that's a thing that we have to combat. We have to navigate. And, that's a whole other issue in and of itself, maybe a topic for another day. But
well, one of the advantage, if you have a dog like I have, it's hard to be invisible.
That's right.
You're invisible in that nobody remembers your name, but they always remember the dog's name.
That's true. Yeah. That's right. Well, and you have a built-in conversation starter. Your dog is a built-in conversation. Oh, I love your dog. He's so cool. He's like, how does he work? But everybody wants to pet him. And then you have to be assertive and say, look, he's working right now. Back off.
He's working right now.
Know? Yeah.
Yeah.
But
he's a union dog, and there are certain requirements of his job. Yeah.
That's right. Another way, we have Kelvin on the Blind Level Tech show as a co-host, and he's the developer and inventor of the See Me cane. And if you guys don't know, this is a cane that lights up, and it's seen for up to, I think he says, a quarter mile or 200 yards or something crazy, but it's widely visible at nighttime. And it's awesome, and it lights up, it's bright, and it looks like you're walking with a freaking lightsaber, and it's amazing. And that in itself is a conversation starter, because people think, why are you walking around with a lightsaber? And people realize that you're blind and you have a cane.
Right.
If you can draw attention, and this is kind of a weird mental gymnastic thing, if you can draw attention to your vision loss in a fun way, it eliminates the invisibility completely.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. But sometimes it's, people laugh because, there's a power outage, and say, I don't know, how are we going to get out of here? I said, no, I'll take care of it. And then they say, oh.
So we had a couple months ago, I guess last year, a gentleman, and I forget his name, but he was on the Blind Chick, and he helped, along with his guide dog, navigate people out of the building for 9/11. And he got tons of people to safety. And that story, I mean, they couldn't see anything. It was all smoke infested, and they didn't know what was going on. Mm-hmm. But the guide dog knew what to do, because he had been taking that route for years, and he knew how to get from the office down to the street. And he'd done it every day, multiple times a day. And so it's one of those funny cases where somebody who was blind ends up saving the sighted people, because, when all the lights go out for the sighted people and they don't have the training, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And when I have a guest come to my place at night and I forget, and they say, Bill, would you turn on the lights? You sighted people are have such a disability. You need light.
It's true. It's true. We do. Every once in a while. Every once in a while, when I'm getting ready for bed or I'm trying to do a task or something, I will close my eyes to see how long I can go before I scare myself into opening my eyes. And I tried cooking a couple of weeks ago, and I was like, I'm going to burn myself, and I really don't want to do that. I've got to play the bass or the keys or something for a weekend. And so it gets really interesting really quickly.
Right. But you see, the issue, what we're talking about all through that is we erase the invisibility in different ways. One, you say the light. Another is to be there when being blind is an asset, in a sense, with being able to get around in a dangerous situation like a building in 9/11. And those kinds of things do require us to be assertive and say, okay, I can do this, just follow me, or taking charge, being in a position that we're not used to or trained to be in.
Right.
And again, the cocktail party. Now, I want to do something I've been wanting to do for a while in talking about cocktail parties or those kinds of things in terms of invisibility. As I mentioned to you, I think last week, we go to a party and we have someone who in 10 seconds of meeting them, they tell us their whole life history.
Yeah.
And we walk away because we just can't handle that much material.
Right.
And I think that when we are not used to socializing and not used to having people be willing to listen to us, because as a blind person, we've been sort of ignored or kept to the side, invisible, but we maybe have that tendency to, I know I did till I really learned
Yeah.
Because we're so grateful somebody is talking to us. But the thing that I've learned actually through some of the training as a therapist is that we have to titrate how much information that we give people at a time and that they're ready for. That is, there are what is called levels of intimacy, where we start off by just getting acquainted. And one of the things with the assertion being assertiveness, we sometimes go into a situation and think that we have to do all the work. And we don't. In fact, the best thing that we can do in starting things up is to ask the person questions about themselves. We don't have to say very much. We can, and because people love to be able to talk about themselves.
Yeah, for the most part.
And so we ask them a question, then we don't have to. And then what we can do is kind of match the level that they're talking. And in other words, if they're talking about something that's going on right now, that's a lower level of intimacy than talking about your life history.
Yep.
But what you do is if somebody's talking about that, you can do that, but you can also think, well, I'm interested in this person. Maybe he or she wants to talk a little bit more about themselves. And you might ask about, okay, are you a native of Colorado? And, when somebody says that, and I came from the East Coast, I usually say, oh, I understood the Museum of Science has taken the natives and put them in a special unit because they're an endangered species.
Yeah.
And, people appreciate getting acknowledged and having somebody listen to them talk about their background.
Yeah.
And as you're talking, the person is treating my information with respect, and I will treat that person's information with respect. And I'll try and, eventually get to the point where, I'm feeling comfortable with this person. I wonder if I might get together with the person after the party or give the person my phone number, vice versa. And in that way, you've done all the preliminary work and you know that you're comfortable with the person and the person is comfortable with you.
Yeah.
Then you can do something like that. Or then you can talk a little bit about what it was, like in your family. You can share family history, which is much more intimate than talking about what's going on in the cocktail hour.
Sure. It's kind of like, if you're comfortable with somebody, it's because they're curious.
Right. But you've got to test it out. See if this person is comfortable with you finding out more about them.
You also have to be comfortable with people asking you questions. And if you're not, then say, well, I don't really feel like answering that question, but I can tell you about, kind of something else.
Right. Right.
It's
just that level of both of you.
Right. Exactly.
One of the things that made me very interested in this idea of what we call level of intimacy, that is, in terms of our language and in terms of meeting people, it was a frustration for me. I became a therapist. And so, when you become a therapist in the beginning, you kind of like everything is therapy and emotions and feelings and so forth. Yeah. And a lot of people can't handle that.
Yeah.
And of all people, my mother couldn't handle it.
Really?
I'd be talking about some of my feelings about something, and my mother would talk about a book she read because she couldn't handle that level. And I got very frustrated and angry, but that's where she was. I came to the realization that's where she is. I'm not going to change her. So I won't go any deeper unless I see a real reason to do so. I won't go any deeper because she's just not willing to respond. And that's true for many, many people.
Yeah, that surface level is about as deep as they can go, and that's okay.
And that's okay. You just record that in your mind. Oh, this person can only handle this much. That's fine. Yep. I like the person, and it's pleasant to be with him or her. Or you can't get a new mother. So, I'm stuck with what I have.
Right.
And I appreciate the good things about her, but she's not going to go where I want to go.
Yeah.
But that's her being assertive and saying, no, I'm not going to go there. And that's fine.
Yeah.
But that's where we talk about, again, it has to do with our expectation. And sometimes, too, when we go into a social situation, we think it's going to be X, Y, Z, and we're going to find true love and happiness at this party and go home and get married.
Right.
It doesn't work that way.
Oh, come on. Sure it does. Sometimes.
Well, it depends on what the party is.
Well, there you go.
And how much drugs and alcohol are involved.
There you go. Yeah, if we're talking about a kegger on a college campus, who knows where you're going to end up.
Yeah, but it's the thing of kind of feeling comfortable with sharing what you want to share about yourself with someone else, and that someone else will treat it with respect.
That's right.
And that means you're paying. See, sometimes we get so involved with what we're doing, we forget to listen to the other person.
Yeah.
And that's true whether you have a disability or not. And we have to pay attention. Oh, wait a minute. I'm talking about me. I think I better, talk about or find out what that person wants. And then that's when the invisibility disappears. Yeah. We become a person because we're think enough of the person to be trying to find out about that person, and we think enough of ourselves that we titrate how much information we give and keep it to the appropriate level of our conversation.
Yeah. Yeah, that takes some both self-discovery and self-understanding to be able to do that. Because if you don't, you can get yourself into some pretty hairy situations pretty quick, especially if you've never set those boundaries before. As somebody who is sighted and as my job dictates, my job is to only ask questions. Very rarely do people ask for my opinions, but that's okay. But except for you. But I enjoy asking questions. And I used to be the kind of person that I'm going to walk into a restaurant and there's not a person in there that's not going to be my friend at the end of the day. And I've had to pare that back and say, I'm only going to volunteer information with people who are curious about who I am. Yeah. And for somebody, but for me, it goes a little bit beyond that because regardless of who I come in contact with, I don't need to have my person necessarily validated by somebody else. I want to validate them by asking questions about their life. If they don't ask me a single question about my life, that's great. I don't want them to feel obligated.
But you find out about them.
Right. I'm a curious person and I enjoy hearing people's stories, and that's why I'm perfect for what I'm doing. But it's a perfect scenario. But I just want I want people to feel so comfortable with getting their story out and speaking about who they are and understanding that they are not invisible in this world. It doesn't matter who you are, whether you're blind, you're in a wheelchair, you have some sort of cognitive thing going on, or it doesn't matter. I just want people to feel seen and heard and loved and cared for. And that's my goal in trying to, dispel this invisibility cloak that's happening.
Exactly. But you see, part of our job, I think, is also to be curious about the person we're talking to.
Yeah.
That is, at a party, both of us, the ideal situation is both of us are curious about each other. Even if we may not see each other ever again, to be curious about this person that I happen to be in close proximity to. And it's that curiosity that allows us to bridge the gap. and be able to say, okay, I'm comfortable if somebody is curious about me to talk about me, but not all the time. And that's how the invisibility disappears, is when we become equals. And I know that's the thing that I think a lot of people with disabilities have trouble with, the idea that they're equal to someone who doesn't have an obvious disability. And that's the training we have to give ourselves. And in stopping the invisibility is saying, I'm just as good as anybody else.
Yeah, exactly.
I have as much to contribute as anybody else. I just happen to be different. Yeah, I know some of the people in the blindness community dislike my using the word differently able. But I think that makes the point that we're able, we just have to do things a little differently than other people. But that does not mean we're less than.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
And that's one of the hardest things. I think that's one of the blockages that we have in asserting ourselves in any kind of situation.
Yeah.
And sometimes we have to be even a little aggressive. And when people refuse to respond to us, especially when you talk about bus drivers or people in airports and so forth who aren't paying attention and say, look, I'm sorry, I need to have this thing to help me. And it's required by law.
Yeah.
But more than that, it just simply makes it easier for me to get around here. And I think that's the name of the game.
Yeah.
But the assertiveness, and see, that's where it gets a little, may feel like aggressive. But sometimes if we look at, again, level between assertive and aggressive, sometimes we do have to be aggressive and state real clearly, hopefully it's very seldom, but very clearly, what we need.
Yeah.
And if people won't listen, then, there has to be, especially with the ADA, which just, I think was signed today or yesterday in 1990, that is enabled us to have permission and legal support for our asserting our needs.
Yep. That's important. Well, as we kind of land this plane, what is a good, practical, easy tip to make yourself either feel not invisible or to become not invisible?
I think the first thing is we need to remind ourselves that we're equal. We're not less than. And that if we need something or somebody tries to put us in a one-down position, we don't have to accept it.
Right.
And I think the other thing is to also be gracious and say, when people do stupid things, which they will, to be gracious and say, this isn't what I need. This is what I need.
Yeah.
And that way, I even say I train, when I'm giving some instruction to a nurse, for example, say I do training in this area and this is the best way to help me. And when we go into a doorway, you put your arm behind you and that tells me to get behind you. And they say, oh, I just learned something today. And they begin to, take it in. But it does mean assertiveness and that we have a right to be treated as equal to anyone else.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Love that.
Any last word from you, Jonathan? I always give you a chance. You sighted people need so much help.
That's true. We do. Just to make sure that invisibility is not necessarily a blind or low vision problem.
Right.
We can, as sighted people, it's said that you can be invisible or alone in an incredibly crowded group of people and still feel that.
Women in industry have felt invisible.
Sure. And, it's not just the visual acuity of being invisible. It's feeling invisible. It's feeling unseen, which we didn't really kind of get into, but that's a different kind of aside to the same coin. But just understanding that you can speak up for the things that you want. If you don't want to feel invisible or be invisible, try to put yourself out there. Go to a party, go on a hike, go on, get together with some friends and you could say, you might have a friend that says, hey, let's go out and get some drinks. And you say, well, I don't know if I really want to deal with all that. Deal with all that, because you're bound to have a really good time. And you may end up meeting somebody who you would have never met if you didn't get out.
The other thing too, I think, is just because the party is 3 hours long and you're finding that it's just not working for you, then you can leave. But think about, okay, what happened to the party? What did I do right? Was this, because it might have been just a dull party, period, that had nothing to do with you. And you need to kind of reflect and train yourself to say, well, Nancy, I could have said this at this time. Not beat yourself up and say, okay, next time I do this, I'll stay a little longer and I'll do X, Y, Z, because it is a training thing.
Yeah.
We have to train ourselves to be less invisible. We have to train because we may have been brought up in a way that, that we were taught to be invisible. No problem at all.
That's right.
And so we need to learn how to do it, and sometimes trial and error is what you do. So it's time for us to sign off, Jonathan, for Blind Sight. I want to remind people who are listening, if you have some feedback about this show or any show, or some ideas for a show, give us a call. You can do the feedback telephone line with 720-712-8856, or you can shoot us an email at feedback@aftersight.org. So for another episode, I say goodbye and look forward to you joining us next week.